The stagecoach hit a rut in the muddy road so hard that Helena Garrison thought her teeth might rattle loose from her skull. And when the driver shouted something unintelligible through the downpour, she knew with terrible certainty that her journey west had just taken a catastrophic turn. The rain had started 3 hours ago as a drizzle, then transformed into a deluge that turned the Nevada desert roads into rivers of mud. Helena pressed her gloved hand against the window, watching sheets of water cascade down the glass, obscuring everything beyond into a gray wall. She had left St. Louis 6 weeks ago with such hope in her heart, traveling to Verdi to become the bride of a man she had corresponded with for 8 months. Bernard Whitmore had written such lovely letters, painting pictures of his successful mercantile and the comfortable life they would share. She had sold everything she owned to afford this journey, leaving behind the only home she had ever known after her father's death left her with nothing but debts and broken promises from relatives, who suddenly remembered they had no room for an unmarried woman of 22. The stagecoach lurched violently to the left. Helena grabbed for the leather strap, but momentum threw her against the side panel. Wood splintered with a crack like thunder, and then the world turned upside down. She screamed as the coach rolled, her body tumbling, luggage and parcels flying. The impact when they hit the ground knocked the air from her lungs. Water immediately began seeping through the shattered door above her head, now pointing toward the sky. Miss, are you hurt?" The driver's voice came muffled through the rain. Helena took inventory of her limbs. Everything ached, but nothing felt broken. "I think I am unharmed." The wheels cracked clean through. "Horse spooked and pulled us into a ditch. We are stuck fast, and with this rain, nobody's coming until morning at earliest." The driver's weathered face appeared in the opening. "Can you climb out?" With his help, Helena managed to extract herself from the ruined coach. The moment she emerged, the full force of the storm hit her. Rain came down in sheets so thick she could barely see 5 feet ahead. Within seconds, her traveling dress was soaked through, the heavy wool absorbing water like a sponge. Her boots sank into mud up to her ankles. "How far to Verdi?" she shouted over the wind. 4 miles, maybe 5. Too far in this weather. There's an old relay station about a mile back. Abandoned, but it has a roof. The driver was already unhitching the horses, struggling with the harness. One of the animals had a nasty cut on its leg. "I have got to get these horses to shelter. Can you walk?" "I have no choice, do I?" The driver pointed back the way they had come. "Follow the road. You cannot miss it. Big stone building on the right. I will come back for you once I get the horses settled." Before Helena could protest, he had mounted one horse and was leading the other, disappearing into the gray curtain of rain. She stood there, alone on a muddy road in the middle of nowhere, water streaming down her face, her carefully pinned hair coming loose in dark tangles. The cold hit her then, seeping through her sodden clothes straight into her bones. Nevada in late October could be warm during the day, but the sun had set an hour ago, and the temperature was dropping fast. Helena began walking. Each step was a battle against the mud trying to claim her boots. The rain pelted her face, ran into her eyes, soaked her to the skin. Her teeth began to chatter. She wrapped her arms around herself, but it did no good. The wind cut through her dress as if she wore nothing at all. She lost track of time. It might have been 10 minutes or an hour. Her whole world narrowed to putting one foot in front of the other, squinting through the rain for any sign of shelter. Her fingers had gone numb. Her legs trembled with cold and exhaustion. When she finally saw the dark shape of a building looming out of the storm, she almost sobbed with relief. The relay station was larger than she had expected, built of stone with a sagging porch. Helena stumbled toward it, her frozen fingers fumbling with the door. It was unlocked, swinging open with a creak. Inside was dark and smelled of dust and old hay, but it was dry. She stepped in, water streaming off her in puddles, and leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. A match flared in the darkness. Helena gasped and jerked upright. In the sudden light, she saw a man standing near the back of the room, his hand cupped around the flame as he lit a lantern. The light grew, illuminating a face that was all sharp angles and shadows, weathered by sun and wind. He wore typical cowboy attire, dusty trail clothes, boots, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast his eyes in shadow. A gun belt hung at his hip. "Easy now," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I am not going to hurt you." Helena realized she had pressed herself back against the door, her heart hammering. "Who are you?" could ask you the same question. He hung the lantern on a hook, and she got a better look at him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, probably in his mid-20s. Dark hair curled over his collar, and several days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. His eyes, she noticed, were an unusual gray-green, like storm clouds over grass. "Name's Kade Yancy. I am heading north, got caught in the storm. Figured I would wait it out here." Helena Garrison. Her teeth were chattering so hard she could barely get the words out. "The stagecoach overturned. The driver said to come here." Kade's expression shifted from wariness to concern. He took a step toward her, then stopped, as if aware that his presence might frighten her. "You are soaked clean through. You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death." "I have nothing else to wear." Helena tried to stop shaking but could not. Her whole body trembled violently now that she had stopped moving. "My luggage, it is all in the stagecoach." "Damn." Kade looked around the empty station, then back at her. Helena watched as he made a decision. Without a word, he shrugged out of the heavy canvas coat he wore. Beneath it, he had on a work shirt and vest. "Here, take this. But you will be cold." "I will be fine." "You are shaking so hard I can hear your teeth. Come on now, do not be stubborn." Helena's pride warred with her desperate need for warmth. The need won. She pushed away from the door on unsteady legs and reached for the coat. Kade met her halfway, and as he draped the coat over her shoulders, she caught the scent of leather, sage, and something else. Something distinctly masculine that made her feel oddly safe. "Thank you," she whispered. "There is more." Kade pulled the coat closed around her, his hands careful not to touch her inappropriately. "You have got to get that dress off. I know it is not proper, but wet clothes will kill you faster than anything. I will turn my back, give you privacy." Helena's mind felt sluggish with cold, but she understood he was right. The wool dress clung to her like ice. "I cannot reach the buttons. They are in the back." Kade's jaw tightened. "All right, turn around." She turned, pulling her wet hair over one shoulder. She felt his fingers at the top button, working it free. He moved with surprising efficiency, unfastening the long row of buttons down her spine. His touch was impersonal, clinical almost, but Helena found herself intensely aware of each brush of his calloused fingers against her back. "There," he said when he finished, and immediately moved away, turning his back. "Get that off and wrap up in my coat. There is a blanket in my saddle roll. I will get it." Helena peeled the sodden dress away from her skin with numb fingers. Her undergarments were wet too, her corset, chemise, and petticoat all soaked. She hesitated, but the cold was unbearable. She stripped down to her thin cotton drawers and chemise, the only things that were not completely saturated. Kade's coat was enormous on her, hanging past her knees. She pulled it tight and crossed her arms over her chest. "I am decent," she said. Kade turned back, a wool blanket in his hands. He approached and wrapped it around her shoulders over the coat. "Sit down. I will see if I can get a fire going." There was a stone fireplace against one wall, and miraculously, some old wood still stacked beside it. Kade knelt and began building a fire, arranging kindling with practiced ease. Within minutes, flames were licking at the dry wood, and blessed warmth began to spread through the room. Helena sank down near the fire, still shaking but already feeling marginally better. She watched Kade work, noticing the efficient way he moved, the quiet competence in everything he did. He draped her dress over some old crates near the fire to dry, then settled himself on the opposite side of the flames, maintaining a respectful distance. "Where were you headed?" he asked, pulling a canteen from his gear and offering it to her. Helena took a small sip of water. It was cold but clean. "Verdi, I was supposed to arrive this evening. My intended, he will be worried." Something flickered across Kade's face, too quick to read. "Your intended?" "Yes. Bernard Whitmore, do you know him?" Kade's expression went carefully blank. "I know of him." "Owns the mercantile?" "Yes." Helena pulled the blanket tighter. "We have been corresponding. He sent for me to become his wife. A mail-order bride." It was not a question, and there was something in Kade's tone she could not quite identify. "That makes it sound so cold." "We have shared letters for months. I know him." Even as she said it, Helena felt a flicker of doubt. Did she really know Bernard? Their letters had been pleasant enough, but they had discussed nothing of substance, nothing real. Kade was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. Rain drummed on the roof and wind howled around the corners of the building. Finally, he spoke. "Miss Garrison, I am going to tell you something, and you can do with it what you will. Bernard Whitmore is not a good man." Helena stiffened. "I beg your pardon. I've got no cause to lie to you." "Whitmore, he has a reputation. This is not the first time he has sent for a bride from back east. There was another girl maybe 2 years ago. She lasted 3 months before she disappeared. Nobody knows where she went, but there were rumors." "What kind of rumors?" Helena's voice came out barely above a whisper. "The kind where a woman shows up to church with bruises she tries to hide. The kind where neighbors hear shouting at night. The kind where one day she is just gone, and Whitmore says she ran off, but her things are all still at the house." Kade met her eyes across the fire. "I am not saying this to frighten you. I am saying it because you deserve to know before you walk into that situation." Helena felt sick, and not from the cold. Why would he want another bride if she left? Because men like that do not change. They just find new victims. Kade's voice was hard. "You seem like a decent woman. You deserve better than that. I have nowhere else to go." The words burst out of Helena before she could stop them. "I sold everything I own to come here. I have no family, no money, nothing." "What am I supposed to do if not marry him?" Kade was quiet again, his brow furrowed. Outside, thunder rumbled. The fire crackled between them, throwing dancing shadows on the walls. Finally, he said, "You could keep going. Head to California, find work, or go north. There are good towns where a woman with sense could make her way." "With what money? How would I live?" Helena heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it. "I could help you." She stared at him. "You do not even know me. Why would you do that?" Kade stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rain. His back was to her, shoulders tense. When he spoke, his voice was low. "My sister married a man like Whitmore. She wrote letters home saying how happy she was, how wonderful everything was. Then the letters stopped. By the time my mother got worried enough to travel to see her, Sarah was dead. He said she fell down the stairs. Maybe she did. Maybe he pushed her. We will never know." He turned back to face Helena, and in the firelight she could see the pain in his eyes. "I swore after that I would never stand by if I saw another woman walking into the same trap. I have got some money saved. It is not much, but it would be enough to get you to Sacramento, maybe even San Francisco. You could start fresh." Helena felt tears prick her eyes. The kindness in his offer, From a stranger, a man who had already given her his coat and stood in the rain while he built her fire and made sure she was warm. It was almost too much. I cannot accept that. It would not be right. What is not right is letting you marry a man who might hurt you. They looked at each other across the fire. Helena saw the earnestness in his face, the genuine concern. She thought about Bernard's letters, which suddenly seemed hollow and rehearsed in her memory. She thought about the long journey west, about selling her mother's wedding ring to pay for the stagecoach fare, about the desperate hope that had sustained her through 6 weeks of travel. All of it, possibly leading to a nightmare. "Tell me about your sister," she said softly. Kade's face softened. He returned to his spot by the fire, sitting down with his back against the wall. "Sarah was 3 years younger than me, smart as a whip, funny, always singing. She met Richard at a church social. He seemed nice enough, respectable, had a good job at a bank. They courted for 6 months before he asked her to marry him. We all thought she was making a good match." He paused, picking at a loose thread on his pants. "After the wedding, they moved 2 towns over. Sarah wrote home once a week like clockwork. Then about a year in, the letters changed. They got shorter, less personal. She stopped mentioning Richard. When Ma would visit, Sarah always had an excuse for why they could not stay longer, why Richard was not there. And she was different, quieter, nervous. Your mother did not suspect, she did, but Sarah denied anything was wrong. Said she was just tired, adjusting to married life. Ma wanted to believe her." Kade's voice roughened. "Then one day we got a telegram. Sarah was dead. We rode out immediately, but Richard had already buried her. Said it was too hot to wait, that she would want a quick funeral. There was no investigation, nothing. He was a respected man and she was just his wife. I am so sorry. I tried to find proof, anything that would stick, but there was nothing. Richard moved away 6 months later, sold everything. Last I heard, he remarried." The bitterness in Kade's voice was palpable. "So when I heard Whitmore talking in the saloon last week about his new bride arriving from St. Louis, describing you like you were a purchase he had made, laughing with his friends about how you would be more obedient than the last one, it made me sick. I have been chewing on it ever since, trying to figure out if there was anything I could do." Helena absorbed this, her mind reeling. "He said I would be more obedient," his exact words, "along with some other things I will not repeat in front of a lady." The fire popped, sending up a shower of sparks. Helena watched them rise and fade. Everything she had planned, everything she had hoped for was crumbling like ash. But beneath the disappointment and fear, something else stirred. Anger. She had not survived her father's death, her family's abandonment, 6 weeks of grueling travel, and a stagecoach crash just to walk meekly into an abusive marriage. "What do you do, Mr. Yancy?" "For a living." The change in subject seemed to surprise him. "I work cattle mostly. Drive them up from Texas, sometimes down from Oregon. Whatever work I can find. I've got a small place up near the Truckee River trying to build up my own herd. It is not much, but it is mine." "So you are a cowboy. I suppose that is what you would call it." Helena made a decision. "I would like to take you up on your offer to help me get to California." Relief washed over Kade's face. "You would? Good, that is good. But not as charity." Helena held up a hand as he started to protest. "I will not take money from you for nothing. You said you have a place by the Truckee River. I can cook, clean, mend clothes. I can keep house. Let me work for you until I have earned enough to repay what you spend getting me to California. Then I will go." Kade frowned. "Miss Garrison, that was not what I meant." "I know. But it is what I am offering. I will not be in debt to anyone again, not even someone as kind as you." Helena met his eyes steadily. "Those are my terms." A slow smile spread across Kade's face, transforming it. He was handsome, she realized, when he smiled like that. "You are stubborn." "I prefer determined." "All right then. "You have got yourself a deal, Miss Garrison." He extended his hand across the fire. Helena reached out and shook it. His hand was warm and calloused, his grip firm. A tingle ran up her arm at the contact. Something she told herself was just relief at having a plan, a way forward. The rain continued through the night. They talked in fits and starts, long conversations punctuated by comfortable silences. Kade told her about growing up in Montana, about learning to ride before he could walk, about the hard winters and beautiful summers. Helena told him about St. Louis, about her father's bookshop and how she had spent her childhood reading every volume on the shelves, about her mother who had died when Helena was 12, about how lost she had felt this past year, adrift in a world that had no place for unmarried women without means. "You could have remarried," Kade said at one point. "A woman like you, educated, pretty, there must have been suitors." Helena felt her cheeks warm at the casual compliment. "There were a few, but none that I could respect. Most were twice my age, looking for someone to care for their children from previous marriages. Or they were men like my father, big on dreams but short on follow-through. I do not know what I wanted, something more. And you thought you would find it with Whitmore. I thought I would find security, stability. After my father died, after I saw how quickly I could lose everything that seemed like the most important thing." She pulled the blanket tighter. "I was wrong. Security is not worth sacrificing yourself for. No, it is not." Around midnight, the rain finally stopped. The silence was almost startling after hours of constant drumming. Kade stood and stretched, his joints popping. "You should try to get some sleep. We will head to my place at first light. It is about 15 miles north. We can ride double on my horse." "What about Verdi? What about Bernard? He will be expecting me." "Let him expect. By the time he realizes you are not coming, you will be long gone from here." Helena knew he was right, but guilt still gnawed at her. "Should I send word, a letter explaining, if you want?" "But Miss Garrison, you do not owe him anything. He was not honest with you. Those letters he wrote, they were lies meant to lure you here. You do not owe liars courtesy." Put that way, it made sense. Helena nodded slowly. "All right, we will go to your place at first light." Kade gathered up his saddle and blankets, making a rough bed on the far side of the room. He gave Helena the space closest to the fire, along with most of the blankets. She protested, but he insisted, and eventually she gave in, too exhausted to argue further. She lay down on the hard floor, wrapped in Kade's coat and the blankets, and listened to his breathing even out across the room. Sleep should have come easily after such a harrowing day, but Helena found herself staring at the dying fire, her mind racing. Everything had changed so quickly. This morning she had been on her way to meet her intended husband, nervous but hopeful. Now she was lying in an abandoned relay station, planning to go live at a stranger's ranch and work as his housekeeper. It was insane. It was completely improper. It was probably the smartest decision she had ever made. She thought about Kade standing in the rain, stripping off his coat to give to her. She thought about the pain in his voice when he spoke of his sister. She thought about his immediate, instinctive kindness to someone he had no reason to help. Whatever else happened, she knew in her bones that she could trust him. In less than 12 hours, this cowboy had shown her more genuine care than Bernard Whitmore had in 8 months of letters. The fire crackled softly. Outside, water dripped from the eaves. Helena finally felt her eyes growing heavy. Just before she drifted off, she heard Kade's voice, soft in the darkness. "Miss Garrison, you are going to be all right, I promise you that." "Thank you, Mr. Yancey," she whispered back. "Call me Kade. Only if you call me Helena." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Good night, Helena." "Good night, Kade." Helena woke to sunlight streaming through the grimy windows and the smell of coffee. She sat up, disoriented for a moment, then remembered everything. The crash, the rain, Kade. She looked around and saw him crouched by the fire which he had rebuilt. A small pot sat on the flames, steam rising from the spout. "Morning," he said when he noticed she was awake. "I've got coffee and some jerky if you are hungry. It is not much of a breakfast, but it is something." "Coffee sounds wonderful." Helena stood, acutely aware that she was still wearing only his coat over her undergarments. Her dress, she saw, was mostly dry now, hanging near the fire. Would you mind, of course?" Kade immediately turned his back. Helena hurried into her dress, which was wrinkled and stained but at least dry. The buttons were impossible to manage on her own. "I am sorry, but I need help again." Kade turned and came over, his fingers making quick work of the buttons. It felt oddly intimate, this simple act of assistance, more intimate than it had any right to. When he finished, Helena found herself reluctant to step away. "Thank you," she said, turning to face him. They stood closer than proper. Kade looked down at her, and Helena saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. Part of her wanted him to. Then he stepped back, breaking the spell. "Coffee's ready," he said, his voice slightly rough. They drank the bitter brew and ate the leathery jerky in companionable silence. As they ate, Helena studied Kade in the daylight. He had a strong face, she decided, not conventionally handsome but striking. There was character in every line, a hardness earned through difficult experiences but softened by an underlying kindness. She liked his hands, liked the capable way they moved. She liked his voice, low and steady. She liked him, she realized with a start. Quite a lot, actually. "We should get moving," Kade said, draining the last of his coffee. "I want to make good time while the weather holds." They packed up quickly. Kade's horse was a sturdy bay gelding, calm and well-trained. He mounted first, then extended his hand to help Helena up. She settled behind him, acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. She had to put her arms around his waist to keep from falling, could feel the solid warmth of him even through his shirt. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." They set off at an easy lope, heading north along the rutted road. The morning was crisp and clear, the storm washed away. Nevada stretched around them in shades of gold and brown, sage and scrub dotting the landscape. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks dusted with early snow. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way. As they rode, Helena felt something loosen in her chest. She had been so tense for so long, wound tight with worry and obligation and fear. Now, with her arms around Kade and the open country stretching before them, she felt almost free. They stopped around noon to rest the horse and eat more jerky. Kade pointed out landmarks, telling her about the area. The Truckee River runs down from Lake Tahoe through the valley. Good water, good grazing. It is why I settled there. The winters can be hard, but the land is rich. "Do you work the ranch alone?" "Mostly. I've got a hand who comes up from town a few times a week to help with the heavy work. Old fellow named Jim, been working cattle since before I was born. Good man." Kade took a sip from his canteen. "The house is not much. 2 rooms, need some repairs. But it is solid and the roof does not leak." "It sounds perfect." He looked at her skeptically. "You have not seen it yet." "I have lived in a boarding house with 6 other women and shared a room the size of a closet. I am not particular." They remounted and continued north. As the afternoon wore on, the landscape began to change. More trees appeared, cottonwoods and willows. The air smelled of water. Then they crested a rise, and Helena saw the river below, a ribbon of silver winding through the valley. And there, on a small rise overlooking the water, stood a cabin. Kade had not exaggerated. It was small, rough, hewn logs with a stone chimney and a sagging porch. but it was situated beautifully, with a view of the river and the mountains beyond. A small barn stood nearby, along with a corral where several horses grazed. Chickens pecked in the yard. "Home," Kade said, and Helena heard the pride in his voice. They rode down to the cabin. Kade helped Helena dismount, his hands steady on her waist. She stood looking around, taking it all in. It was isolated, certainly. The nearest neighbor was probably miles away. But there was something peaceful about it, something that called to a part of her she had not known existed. "Let me show you inside," Kade said. The cabin's main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room all in one. A cast iron stove sat against one wall, a rough wooden table and chairs in the center. The furnishings were sparse but functional. Everything was neat, she noticed, surprisingly clean for a bachelor's home. "My room is through there," Kade indicated a door on the left. "You can have that one." He pointed to a door on the right. "It is small, but there is a bed and a chest of drawers." Helena opened the door to find a tiny room with a narrow bed, a chest, and a single window looking out toward the river. It was perfect. "This will do nicely, thank you." Kade looked relieved. "I will get your things." "Wait, you do not have any things." "No, they are all still in the stagecoach, I suppose." "Damn, I did not think of that. You will need clothes, supplies." Kade ran a hand through his hair, thinking. "There is a general store in town about 8 miles east. We can ride there tomorrow, get you what you need." "I have no money," Helena reminded him. "I will front you the cost. You can work it off like we agreed." She wanted to argue but knew it was pointless. She needed clothes, needed basic necessities. "All right, but we keep careful accounting. I want to know exactly how much I owe you." "Deal." They spent the rest of the afternoon settling in. Kade showed Helena around the property, introduced her to the horses and the chickens. She collected eggs while he tended to the animals. They worked together to prepare a simple dinner of beans and salt pork, eating as the sun set over the mountains. "This is nice," Helena said, watching the sky turn gold and pink. "Peaceful." "It is." Kade leaned back in his chair. "That is why I chose it. After Sarah died, after all that ugliness, I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere I could think." "Do you ever get lonely?" He considered the question. "Sometimes, but lonely is better than being around the wrong people." Helena understood that sentiment completely. She had been lonely for years, even surrounded by people in St. Louis. Perhaps especially then. As darkness fell, they retreated inside. Kade lit the lamps while Helena washed the dishes. It felt strangely domestic, comfortable in a way that surprised her. She barely knew this man, yet being here with him felt more right than anything had in years. "I should turn in," Kade said eventually. "We will ride to town first thing tomorrow." "Kade," Helena turned to face him, "thank you for everything. For the coat, for bringing me here, for giving me a chance to start over. I will work hard, I promise. I will earn my keep." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the lamplight. "You do not have to thank me, Helena. I am glad I was there, glad I could help." He paused, then added softly, "Glad it was you I found in that relay station." Something in the way he said it made Helena's heart skip. She felt heat rise to her cheeks and was grateful for the dim light. "Good night, Kade. Good night." Helena lay in her narrow bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. An owl hooted somewhere nearby. The river murmured in the distance. Through the thin wall, she could hear Kade moving around in his room, the creak of his bed as he settled in. She thought about how different this night was from what she had imagined. She had pictured herself in Bernard Whitmore's house, nervous and uncertain, hoping her new husband would be kind. Instead, she was here, safe in a tiny room in a cowboy's cabin, planning a future she could barely imagine. But it was not fear that kept her awake. It was something else, something that fluttered in her chest when she thought about Kade's smile, about the way he had looked at her before saying goodnight. It was far too soon to call it anything, much too soon. They had known each other barely a day. Yet Helena could not deny that she felt something, a pull toward this quiet cowboy who had given her his coat and asked for nothing in return. She fell asleep smiling. The next weeks fell into a rhythm. Helena proved to be as capable as she had claimed. She took over the cooking and cleaning, mended Kade's worn clothes, tended the vegetable garden that had been neglected. She learned to milk the cow Kade bought from a neighbor, to churn butter, to bake bread in the temperamental stove. The work was harder than anything she had done in St. Louis, but she found she liked it. There was satisfaction in tangible results in going to bed tired from honest labor. Kade, for his part, treated her with unfailing respect. He never pressed her boundaries, never made her uncomfortable. But Helena noticed the way his eyes followed her sometimes when he thought she was not looking. She noticed how he found excuses to be near her, to help her with tasks she could have managed alone. She noticed because she was doing the same thing. They talked constantly. Over breakfast, during the long evenings after work was done, during the rides to town for supplies. Helena learned about Kade's childhood in Montana, about the father who had taught him to rope and ride before being killed in a range war when Kade was 15. She learned about his dreams of building a successful ranch, of breeding quality horses. Kade learned about Helena's love of books, about the poetry she secretly wrote, about her complicated feelings regarding her father, who she had loved despite his failings. "You miss him?" Kade asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I miss who I wanted him to be," Helena said thoughtfully. "I miss the father I imagined when I was little before I was old enough to see his flaws. But the real man, I do not know, is that terrible? No, it is honest." Kade whittled a piece of wood, shavings curling at his feet. "We are allowed to have complicated feelings about the people who hurt us, even if they are family." "Did you have complicated feelings about your father?" "I did. He was hard, expected a lot, never satisfied with anything I did. But he taught me well, taught me to survive. I hated him sometimes when I was young. Now he is gone, and I just miss having a father, any father." He blew the dust off his carving. Funny how death simplifies things in our memory. Helena understood. She found herself telling Kade things she had never told anyone, secrets and fears and hopes. He listened without judgment, offered perspective when she asked for it, comfort when she needed it. She had never had a friend like this, someone she could be completely honest with. Jim, the ranch hand Kade had mentioned, turned out to be a grizzled man in his 60s with a limp and a dry sense of humor. He showed up one morning and took in Helena's presence without comment beyond a nod. "This is Miss Garrison," Kade said. "She is working here as housekeeper." Jim's eyes flicked between them, shrewd and knowing. "That right? Well, pleased to meet you, miss. Maybe now this place will have some proper cooking. Kade burns everything." "I do not burn everything," Kade protested. "You burned water once. That was one time." Helena laughed, delighted by their easy banter. Jim became a regular presence, showing up 2 or 3 times a week to help with the ranch work. He treated Helena with grandfatherly courtesy and seemed to approve of the changes she had made to the homestead. "Place looks better," he told Kade one day when he thought Helena could not hear. "You look better too. Happy." "I am happy," Kade replied, and Helena's heart swelled at the simple statement. A month passed, then 2. October gave way to November, and the weather turned colder. Kade spent long days bringing in hay for the winter, reinforcing the barn, preparing for the snows that would come. Helena helped where she could, learning the rhythms of ranch life. She found she loved it, loved the physical work, loved the satisfaction of caring for the animals, loved the stark beauty of the landscape. What she loved most, though, was Kade. She could not deny it anymore, could not pretend what she felt was simple gratitude or friendship. She was falling in love with him, with his quiet strength and unexpected humor, with the gentleness he showed to injured animals, with the way he looked at her like she was something precious. She loved his laugh, rare but genuine. She loved his hands, capable and strong. She loved the way he said her name, soft as a prayer, but she did not know how he felt. He was kind, certainly, but he was kind by nature. His care for her might be nothing more than the same compassion he would show anyone in need. The thought that he might not feel the same way she did was almost unbearable. So Helena kept her feelings locked tight inside, afraid to risk the fragile peace they had built. The first snow came in mid-November, a light dusting that made the world look clean and new. Helena stood on the porch wrapped in a shawl, watching the flakes fall. Kade came up behind her, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Beautiful," he said softly. "Yes." Helena was not sure if he meant the snow or something else. She was afraid to ask. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Kade said, "Helena, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" "I have been thinking. About our arrangement, about you working to pay off your debt." He paused and Helena held her breath. "The thing is, I do not want you to feel obligated to stay here. If you want to leave to go to California like we originally planned, I will take you. No questions asked. You do not owe me anything." It was the last thing she expected him to say. "You want me to leave?" "No." The word came out sharper than he seemed to intend. He took a breath and continued more calmly. "No, I do not want you to leave, but I do not want you to stay out of obligation either. I need you to stay because you want to, because you choose to." Helena turned to face him fully. They were inches apart, his face serious in the dim light. "And if I choose to stay, what then?" "Then I would ask if I could court you properly, take you to dances in town, bring you flowers, do all the things a man is supposed to do when he is interested in a woman." Kade's voice was low, intense. "Because I am interested, Helena. I have been since that first night in the relay station, since you stood there dripping wet and stubborn and brave. I tried not to be. You were supposed to marry someone else, and I was just helping you escape a bad situation. But somewhere along the way I stopped being able to imagine my life without you in it." Helena felt tears prick her eyes. "You truly mean that? Every word?" "I am in love with you, Helena Garrison. Have been for weeks now, maybe from the start." He reached up and cupped her face in his hand, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "So what do you say? Will you let me court you?" "No," Helena whispered and watched his face fall. Then she smiled. "Because there is no need. I have already made my choice, Kade Yancy. I love you too." The joy that blazed across his face was blinding. "You do?" "I do. I think I have since you stood in the rain and gave me your coat, since you trusted me with your pain about your sister, since you treated me with respect and kindness when I had no right to expect either." She reached up and covered his hand with hers. "I love you. And I want to stay, not out of obligation, but because this is where I belong. With you." Kade made a sound low in his throat and pulled her close, his arms coming around her fierce and sure. Helena melted into him, wrapping her arms around his neck. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other as snow fell softly around them. Then Kade pulled back just enough to look at her face. "May I kiss you, please?" Helena breathed. His lips met hers soft at first, tentative, then deeper as she responded. Helena had been kissed before, quick pecks from unsuitable suitors, but nothing like this. This was warmth and promise and coming home all at once. She tangled her fingers in his hair and kissed him back with everything she felt, all the love and hope and joy she had been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Kade rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me." Helena laughed, giddy with happiness. "Is that a question or a command?" "Both." "Either. Please, Helena, I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other 2 months, but I have never been more certain of anything. Marry me. Build a life here with me. Let me spend the rest of my days making you happy." There was no hesitation, no doubt. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." They kissed again, longer this time, deeper. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, but Helena felt nothing but warmth. She was home. After so much searching, so much uncertainty, she had finally found where she belonged. They married 3 weeks later in the small church in town, with Jim as witness and the preacher's wife playing the piano. Helena wore a dress she and Kade had picked out together, simple blue calico that made her eyes shine. Kade wore his best clothes, his hair neatly trimmed, his face clean-shaven. He looked handsome and nervous and so full of love that Helena wanted to cry. "I do," she said when the preacher asked, her voice clear and sure. "I do," Kade echoed, and then they were married. The kiss to seal their vows was chaste, appropriate for church, but the promise in it made Helena blush. That night, in the cabin that was now truly theirs, Kade carried her over the threshold and they began their marriage in earnest. Two people who had found each other by chance and chosen each other by design. The winter was hard, as Kade had warned. Snow piled high, and for weeks at a time they were trapped at the ranch, unable to get to town. But Helena had never been happier. They spent the long evenings reading by firelight, talking, making plans for the spring. Kade taught her to play chess, and she taught him the poems she loved. They made love in their warm bed while wind howled outside, learning each other's bodies with patience and joy. "I never knew it could be like this," Helena whispered one night, curled against Kade's side, his arm around her. "Like what? So easy, so right. With Bernard, I thought marriage would be duty and obligation, but with you it is just being together." Kade pressed a kiss to her hair. "It is because we are partners, equals. That is how marriage should be." Spring came eventually, as it always does. The snow melted, and the valley burst into green. Helena planted a garden, vegetables and flowers both. Kade worked from dawn to dusk expanding the ranch, building new corrals, breaking horses. They worked side by side, building their future one day at a time. In May, Helena realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain, then told Kade over breakfast one morning. He dropped his coffee cup, staring at her in shock. "A baby, we are going to have a baby." "Yes. In December, I think." Kade let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "We are having a baby." The pregnancy was not easy. Helena was sick for months, could barely keep food down. Kade fretted over her constantly, bringing her tea and crackers, rubbing her feet, reading to her when she was too tired to do anything but rest. As her belly grew, he became even more protective, insisting she avoid heavy work, hovering like a mother hen. "I am pregnant, not dying," Helena told him with exasperation one day when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I know. I just want to keep you safe, both of you." She softened, seeing the genuine worry in his eyes. "We are safe. You keep us safe." Their son was born on a cold December night, 2 days before Christmas. The midwife from town came to help, and Jim paced on the porch with Kade while Helena labored. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when Kade, hearing her cries through the door, looked ready to break down the door and demand they stop hurting her. "That is how it goes, son," Jim said quietly. "Women are stronger than us in ways we will never understand." Finally, a baby's cry pierced the air. The midwife opened the door, smiling. "You have a son. healthy and strong, and your wife is tired but well." Kade rushed inside to find Helena propped up in bed, exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Kade, look at him." Kade approached slowly, almost afraid. Helena pulled back the blanket to reveal a tiny red face, eyes scrunched shut, one little fist waving in the air. He was perfect. "Can I hold him?" Kade's voice was hoarse. "Of course. He is yours." Kade gathered his son into his arms with infinite care, cradling the small, warm weight against his chest. The baby opened his eyes, dark blue like all newborns, and seemed to look right at him. Something in Kade's chest cracked wide open, a rush of love so intense it was almost painful. "Hello, son," he whispered. "I am your father. I am going to take care of you and your mother for the rest of my life. That is a promise." They named him Samuel, after Kade's father, and Thomas, after Helena's. Sam for short. He was a good baby, healthy and happy, with a shock of dark hair and his mother's delicate features. Kade was a devoted father, up at night to walk with Sam when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, singing off-key lullabies. Helena watched her husband with their son and felt her love for him deepen into something almost beyond words. This man, this good, kind man, had saved her from a terrible fate and given her a life beyond her wildest dreams. "What are you thinking?" Kade asked one evening, catching her watching him rock Sam to sleep. "That I am the luckiest woman alive. I am the lucky one. You and Sam, you are everything, my whole world. Not just yours, ours. We built this together." He smiled and leaned over to kiss her, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. "Yes, we did." The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch prospered. Kade developed a reputation for breeding quality horses, and buyers came from as far as California to purchase his stock. They expanded the cabin, adding rooms as their family grew. 2 years after Sam, they had a daughter they named Grace, fierce and beautiful from the start. 3 years after that came another boy, Jonathan, who was quiet and thoughtful. Helena wrote whenever she could, poems and stories that she kept in a journal. Kade read them all and encouraged her to send some to newspapers. To her shock, several were published, and she began to make a small income from her writing. It was nothing compared to what the ranch brought in, but it was hers, and Kade was as proud of her success as he was of his own. They had hard times, too. There were years when the weather was cruel and they lost livestock. There was the year Sam broke his arm falling from a horse, and Helena thought her heart would stop. There were the normal struggles of any marriage, disagreements and hurt feelings, and learning to navigate life as partners. But through it all, they had each other, and that made everything bearable. On their 10th anniversary, Kade took Helena back to the relay station where they had met. It was still abandoned, still weathered and worn. They stood inside, remembering. "This is where my life really began," Helena said softly. "The night I met you. The night I found everything I did not know I was looking for." Kade pulled her close. "I love you, Helena, more now than even then. I love you too. Thank you for giving me your coat. Thank you for standing in the rain." He smiled, that slow, warm smile that still made her heart skip. "I would do it again in a heartbeat. I would do anything for you. I know. That is why I love you." They kissed in the place where their story began. Two people who had found each other by chance and chosen each other every day since. Years continued to pass, measured in seasons and harvests, in birthdays and holidays, in the 1,000 small moments that make a life. Sam grew tall and strong, learning the ranch work from his father, dreaming of expansion. Grace was brilliant and stubborn, determined to go to college despite the skeptics who said girls did not need education. Jonathan loved animals and spent hours studying veterinary texts Kade ordered for him from San Francisco. Helena's hair began to show silver, and Kade's face gained new lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But when they looked at each other, they saw the same people they had been that rainy October night in 1878. Two souls recognizing each other across the distance of loneliness and need. On a summer evening in 1903, Helena sat on the porch of their now substantial ranch house, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. She was 64, Kade 67. The children were grown now, Sam running the ranch with his father, Grace teaching school in Sacramento, Jonathan apprenticing with a veterinarian in Reno. There were grandchildren too, 5 of them, who visited often and filled the house with noise and laughter. Kade came out and settled into the chair beside hers, reaching for her hand like he had done 10,000 times before. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the day fade. "You ever regret it?" Kade asked suddenly. "Giving up the life you might have had, the books and culture of the city?" Helena looked at him in surprise. "Never, not for a single moment. This life, this family, you are better than anything I could have imagined. Even though it started with a stagecoach crash and a rainstorm, especially because of that." She squeezed his hand. "We all need a little rain sometimes. It washes away what does not serve us and makes room for new growth." Kade lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You are wiser than I am. I have had a good teacher. You taught me what it means to be truly loved." They sat together as the stars began to appear, the same stars that had shone on that October night 25 years ago when a cowboy gave a shivering woman his coat and stood in the rain while she found warmth. Two people who had saved each other and built a life of love and purpose from the ashes of what might have been disaster. "I would do it all again," Kade said softly. "Every moment, every hardship, every joy, all of it with you." "As would I," Helena replied. "As would I, my love." And in the end, that was what mattered. Not how they found each other, but what they had built together. A partnership, a family, a love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger for it. They had taken a chance on each other when they had every reason not to, and it had made all the difference. The ranch they built together would continue for generations, worked by their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The story of how Helena and Kade met would become family legend, told and retold at gatherings, embellished with each telling but always maintaining the essential truth at its heart. That sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms. Sometimes it is a cowboy giving a stranger his coat in the rain. Sometimes it is choosing compassion over convenience, kindness over cruelty. Sometimes it is recognizing that the person standing in front of you, cold and frightened and brave, is exactly who you have been waiting for all your life. Helena and Kade lived many more good years together, growing old side by side, their love constant and true. When death finally came for them, as it comes for everyone, they went peacefully, surrounded by the family they had built, secure in the knowledge that they had lived well and loved truly. Their graves sit side by side on the hill overlooking the Truckee River, with a view of the valley they worked and the mountains they loved. The inscriptions are simple. Helena's reads beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She found home. Kade says beloved husband, father, grandfather. He gave his coat. And if you visit on a rainy October evening, when the conditions are just right, local legend says you can see 2 figures standing on that hill, close together against the storm, a woman wrapped in an oversized coat, and a man standing tall beside her, neither one willing to leave the other even for a moment. Because some loves are strong enough to last beyond life itself. Some bonds, forged in a moment of kindness and strengthened by years of choice, are truly eternal. And some stories, begun in desperate circumstances and built through dedication and devotion, never truly end. They just become legend. They become the stories we tell to remind ourselves that love is real, that kindness matters, that a single act of compassion can change the entire trajectory of a life. That sometimes the best thing we can do is give someone our coat and stand in the rain, trusting that warmth will find us both. Helena and Kade's story became that reminder for generations to come. A testament to the power of choosing love over convenience, of seeing the person in front of you as deserving of dignity and care, of building a life based on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than obligation or convention. And so their story ends where it began, in a rainstorm in Nevada, with a woman finding shelter and a man finding purpose, both of them finding the love that would sustain them through all the years to come. A love built on a foundation of one simple act of kindness, grown through commitment and care into something beautiful and lasting. The Wild West was a hard place, unforgiving and often cruel. But it was also a place where people could reinvent themselves, where second chances bloomed in unlikely circumstances, where a cowboy and a mail-order bride could find each other in a storm and build something true and lasting. Their happily ever after was not a fairy tale ending, perfect and problem-free. It was something better, a real life, shared by two people who chose each other every day, who worked together through joy and sorrow, who built a legacy of love that lasted long after they were gone. And that, in the end, is the very best kind of love story there is.